For 40 years, the old man had been running the small-town airport. Then he saw a strange signal on his radar screen. It was coming from the direction of Russia. That's when 74-year-old Robert Johnson's hands started to shake. He had seen this signal before, in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The moment Robert Johnson saw that signal, he was transported back 40 years. That cold night at Cheyenne Mountain, alarm bells, red lights. Commanders shouting DEFCON 2. That night, America was on the brink of nuclear war, and only 23-year-old Robert and the other radar operators were protecting the country. Now at 74, at a quiet small-town airport, the same signal was in front of him again. His hands instinctively reached for the old console. Classification protocols came to mind. Unknown aircraft, bearing 47, altitude 60, 0 feet, speed Mach 2.8. This wasn't a normal aircraft. This was a Russian reconnaissance plane. But what was it doing here, in this small town? Robert's heart raced. After 40 years, it was as if the Cold War had started again. And this time, he was alone. Welcome to the last stand. Have you ever been interested in radar technology? Or are you curious about the Cold War period? Share your experiences in the comments. Robert Johnson had been running Mountain View's only airport for 15 years. At 74, medium height, gray-haired, he was a quiet man. The townspeople knew him as polite but somewhat distant. Robert would arrive early in the mornings and leave late in the evenings. The airport was small, just 2 runways, a control tower, and a few hangars. At most, 6-8 small aircraft would take off and land each day. Farmers' crop dusters, private jet owners' planes, and sometimes medical transport aircraft. But Robert took this job seriously. Every morning he would check the radar systems. He would examine weather reports. He would test radio frequencies. Perhaps he was being too meticulous for such a simple airport. The townspeople jokingly called him Radar Bob, because Robert was good with electronic devices. He would repair his neighbors' broken televisions and radios. But he never talked much about these things. He didn't say much about his past either. On the morning of October 28th, he had arrived early as usual. The weather was a bit mixed. High winds, low visibility. He was monitoring the radar screen more carefully that day. At 10:30, the first strange signal came. The dot appearing in the northeast corner of the radar screen was different from normal. It was too fast, it was too high, and it was coming from the wrong direction. Robert's heart began to race. His hand automatically went to the old switches on the console. But this wasn't a NORAD console anymore. It was the simple radar system of a small-town airport. "Calm down, Robert," he muttered to himself. "This is probably a weather balloon or a high-altitude research flight." But the signature was wrong. The speed was wrong, the altitude was wrong, and the bearing 47 degrees, coming directly from the direction of Russia. His 40-year-old training came to mind. Unknown aircraft, request identification, state your call sign and destination. But he was no longer a military controller. He was just a small-town airport manager. Yet those old instincts were warning him. This wasn't an ordinary aircraft. Robert Johnson's story had begun in 1962. At 23, he had been stationed at the Cheyenne Mountain complex in Colorado Springs. NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. It was the most tense years of the Cold War. The nuclear standoff between the Soviet Union and America had reached its peak. Robert and his colleagues would stand at radar screens 24 hours a day. Their mission was simple but critical: to detect Soviet bombers or missiles. Back then, Robert was a young, excited technician. He was interested in electronics, passionately devoted to radar technology. At NORAD, he had learned the most advanced radar systems. Classification protocols, threat assessment procedures, communication protocols. But most importantly, he had learned to recognize Soviet aircraft signatures. Tu-95 Bear bombers, MiG-20 Aeon fighters, reconnaissance aircraft. Each had its unique signature on radar. When the Cuban Missile Crisis erupted in October 1962, Robert and his team never slept. They had remained at DEFCON 2 for 13 days. They knew they were one button away from nuclear war. That experience had changed Robert. He had felt the weight of responsibility. He understood that he was carrying America's security on his shoulders. Now Robert was looking at the radar screen. That signal was still there, and he recognized its signature. Tu-142 Bear F, he whispered. Soviet-Russian long-range maritime patrol aircraft, but this was impossible. Tu-142s normally wouldn't enter American airspace, especially not to fly patterns over a small-town airport. Robert did a deeper analysis. The aircraft's speed was around Mach 0.8, altitude 45,000 feet. Direction: it was moving along the east-west axis, as if it was conducting an area scan. His heart beat even faster. This was a reconnaissance flight. But what was it reconnaissance of? Mountain View wasn't a strategic location. There were no important military installations. The nearest Air Force base was 200 miles away. Then it occurred to him, 50 miles north, behind the mountains, there were abandoned missile silos. They had been decommissioned in the 1980s. Maybe the Russians were checking whether these silos had been reactivated. Robert acted on his old instincts. He turned on the radio, switched the frequency to the military emergency channel. This is Mountain View Airport, calling any military authority. We have unknown aircraft on scope, possibly Russian reconnaissance, requesting guidance. Static came from the radio. Then a clear voice was heard. Mountain View Airport, this is Malmstrom Air Force Base Control. Did we understand correctly that you said unknown aircraft? Robert's hand was shaking with the microphone. After 40 years, he was doing military communication again. Affirmative, Malmstrom. I have aircraft at bearing 47, altitude 45, 0, speed approximately Mach 0.8. Signature consistent with Tu-142 maritime patrol aircraft. Aircraft appears to be conducting area reconnaissance. There was silence on the radio. Then a different voice came. Mountain View, this is Colonel David Harper, Malmstrom Base Commander. Could you repeat your aircraft identification? And please state your qualifications for this assessment. Robert took a deep breath. It was time to reveal the past he had kept secret. Colonel Harper, this is Robert Johnson, former NORAD radar operator. I served at Cheyenne Mountain Complex from 1962 to 1987. 25 years of radar analysis and Soviet aircraft identification. I am currently Mountain View Airport Manager. Silence again. This time it lasted longer. Mr. Johnson, maintain observation and report any course changes. We're scrambling F-16s from Malmstrom for visual confirmation. Estimated arrival time, 20 minutes. Robert's heart was beating with a mixture of pride and anxiety. After 40 years, he was back on duty. The next 20 minutes were the longest minutes of Robert's life. He was watching the radar screen without taking his eyes off it. The Tu-142 continued to conduct area scans in a regular pattern. Radio traffic had increased. Continuous updates were coming from Malmstrom Base. NORAD Cheyenne Mountain was being informed. The Pentagon was being reported to. Mountain View, this is Falcon 1. Inbound to your location for visual intercept, came the voice of the F-16 pilot. Roger, Falcon 1. Bogey is at bearing 65, altitude 45, 0, heading east-northeast. Maintain safe distance. Aircraft appears to be in international airspace but conducting suspicious reconnaissance pattern. Robert's old training had returned. His terminology, communication protocols, tactical assessment. As if he had never taken a break. 2 new contacts appeared on radar. The F-16s were approaching. Fast movers, clean signatures. American fighters. Mountain View. Falcon 1 has visual contact. Confirming Tu-142 Bear aircraft, Russian Air Force markings. Aircraft is maintaining course, no aggressive actions observed. In Mountain View, when the sound of jet engines was heard, the townspeople became curious. F-16s were passing overhead. Normally, military aircraft were not seen in this area. Mayor Thomas Peterson, Sheriff William Davis, and several town residents came to the airport. They found Robert concentrated at the radar screen. Robert, what's going on? Those jets woke up the whole town. Mayor Peterson asked. Military exercise. Robert gave a short answer without taking his eyes off the screen. But Sheriff Davis was suspicious. He was hearing Robert's radio conversations. Technical terms, military codes. Robert, how do you know all this radar stuff, and why are you talking to Air Force bases like you're one of them? Robert hesitated. He had been living in this town for 15 years. No one knew his military background. He had introduced himself as a retired electronics technician. I worked with radar systems before, long time ago. Mayor Peterson was intrigued. What kind of work, Robert? You never mentioned military service. The voice from Malmstrom base came over the radio. Mountain View. Russian aircraft has turned northeast, departing American airspace. Excellent work on early detection and tracking. The townspeople were shocked. It was time to learn who Robert Johnson really was. Sheriff Davis asked directly, Robert, what exactly did you do before coming to Mountain View? Robert was looking at the radar screen. The Russian aircraft was now gone. The F-16s were returning to base. The crisis had passed. But his 40 years of secrecy was about to end. I was a radar operator, he said quietly. NORAD, Cheyenne Mountain. Mayor Peterson's eyes widened. NORAD? The Missile Defense Command? 25 years, Robert confirmed. From 1,960 to 1,987. Radar analysis, aircraft identification, threat assessment. Sheriff Davis was amazed. You mean you were watching for Russian bombers? During the Cold War? Among other things, yes. And you never told anyone in town? Robert shrugged. Didn't seem relevant. I retired, moved here, started managing the airport. Simple life. Mayor Peterson realized. But you just prevented a potential incident. Your experience, your knowledge, you identified that Russian plane immediately. Colonel Harper's voice came over the radio. Mountain View, this is Colonel Harper again. Mr. Johnson, I need to speak with you personally. Can you come to Malmstrom base today? We have some things to discuss. Robert sighed. His quiet retirement was about to end. Roger, Colonel. I'll drive up this afternoon. The townspeople remained in silence. They were just learning who Robert Johnson was. That afternoon, Robert drove to Malmstrom Air Force Base. After 40 years, he was back at a military installation. Gates, security, uniformed personnel, nostalgic feelings. Colonel Harper welcomed him warmly. Mr. Johnson, impressive work today. Your early detection potentially prevented a major intelligence incident. Just did what I was trained to do, Colonel. 25 years NORAD service, I read your record. Commendation medals, exemplary ratings. Why didn't you mention this background when you moved to Mountain View? Robert was uncomfortable. Wanted a quiet retirement, sir. Didn't think past experience mattered for running a small airport. Colonel Harper leaned forward. Mr. Johnson, we have a situation. Russian reconnaissance flights have increased 300% in the last 6 months. They're probing our air defenses, testing response times, mapping radar coverage. I see. Traditional NORAD installations are well known to them, but small civilian airports with experienced operators. That's unexpected. They didn't anticipate being detected by Mountain View Airport. Robert understood. You want me to continue monitoring. More than that. We want to upgrade your radar system, provide you with secure communication links to NORAD and regional commands. Make Mountain View an unofficial early warning station. Robert was shocked. Colonel, I'm 74 years old. I retired for a reason. Your country needs you, Mr. Johnson. Your experience is invaluable. And today proved you still have the skills. Colonel Harper explained the proposal. Mountain View Airport would have an advanced radar system installed. Robert would receive training updates about modern threats. Secure communication equipment would be installed. Officially, you'll remain Mountain View Airport Manager. Unofficially, you'll be our Northern Sector Early Warning Specialist. Russian aircraft, Chinese surveillance flights, unidentified aerial phenomena, anything unusual. And the townspeople? They don't need to know details. Just that you're cooperating with the military for regional security. Robert thought about it. He was 74. He was enjoying retirement. But today's experience had awakened the old NORAD operator within him. I'll need modern equipment training. Technology has advanced a lot since 1987. Colonel Harper smiled. We'll send instructors. Latest radar analysis software, satellite coordination systems, threat identification protocols. You'll be better equipped than most active duty installations. Robert felt excitement. Purpose was returning to his life. When do we start? Immediately. Equipment arrives next week. Training begins Monday. And Mr. Johnson, thank you. Veterans like you are America's invisible shield. Robert was proud. After 40 years, he was back in service. When Robert returned to Mountain View, the townspeople were curious. Sheriff Davis, Mayor Peterson, and several neighbors were waiting at the airport. So, what did the Air Force want? Mayor Peterson asked. They asked me to continue monitoring airspace. My radar experience might be useful for regional security. Sheriff Davis was impressed. 25 years NORAD service. Robert, why did you keep this secret? Robert sighed. When you spend 25 years watching for nuclear war, you appreciate peaceful life. Mountain View offered that peace. But today, you saved the day, Mayor Peterson said. That Russian plane. If you hadn't detected it, someone else would have eventually. I just happened to be first. Mrs. Margaret Henderson, the town's oldest resident, approached. Robert Johnson, I've known you 15 years. Thought you were just a quiet airport manager. Now I learn you were protecting America from Soviet missiles? Robert was uncomfortable with the attention. Just did my job, Mrs. Henderson. Nonsense. You're a hero. Cold War hero. Other townspeople were gathering. Word spreads fast in small towns. Robert's secret military career had become news. We should have a town ceremony, Mayor Peterson declared. Honor our local veteran. Robert panicked. Please, no ceremonies. I prefer quiet life. But the damage was done. The secret was out. In the following days, there was great excitement in Mountain View. As the townspeople learned Robert Johnson's story, they became more and more impressed. Mayor Peterson did research. He obtained Robert's service history from NORAD records. 25 years of unblemished service. Duty during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Multiple commendation letters. Exemplary evaluations. Robert, you served during the most dangerous period of the Cold War, the mayor explained. You and your colleagues prevented nuclear catastrophe. This deserves recognition. Robert was reluctant. I didn't serve for recognition, did it for duty. Exactly why you deserve honor, Sheriff Davis added. Robert, half the town thought you were just a quiet old guy who ran the airport. Now we learn you were standing guard against World War III. Mrs. Henderson organized the town women. We're planning an appreciation dinner. The whole community should know about Robert's service. Robert protested. Please, I don't need attention. Just want to do my job. But the community had decided. The local newspaper, Mountain View Gazette, wrote a feature article. Local airport manager revealed as Cold War hero. The story mentioned today's incident with the Russian reconnaissance aircraft. Robert's quick identification and coordination with the Air Force. The article concluded. Robert Johnson served 25 years protecting America. Now, at 74, he's still watching our skies. Robert read the article and sighed deeply. His quiet retirement was officially over. Over the weekend, technicians from Malmstrom base came. They were installing modern radar equipment at Mountain View Airport. Satellite communication dishes, secure radio systems, advanced computer terminals. Robert was fascinated by the new technology. When he retired in 1987, radar systems were analog. Now they were digital, computer-integrated, satellite-linked. This is an AN FPS 117 radar upgrade. The lead technician explained. Detection range 200 miles, altitude 0 feet. Can identify aircraft type, speed, heading, even approximate payload. Robert was impressed. Much better than what we had at NORAD in '87. And this is your secure communication console. Direct link to NORAD Cheyenne Mountain, Malmstrom base, and regional air defense sectors. Training began. Robert quickly adapted to the new systems. His electronics background helped. But more importantly, the fundamental radar principles hadn't changed. Track aircraft, classify threats, report anomalies, coordinate responses. The townspeople were curious about the construction. Official story. Airport security upgrade for regional coordination. Mrs. Henderson observed the workers. Robert, this looks like a military installation now. Just better equipment for air traffic safety. Robert replied diplomatically. In reality, Mountain View Airport was turning into a mini NORAD station. The combination of Robert's experience and modern technology was creating an effective early warning system. In the first week, he detected 3 unidentified aircraft. They were all legitimate civilian flights, but he performed proper classification and tracking. The town appreciation dinner was held at the Mountain View Community Center. 200 people attended, half the town's entire population. Mayor Peterson made opening remarks. Tonight, we honor Robert Johnson, who served 25 years protecting our nation during the Cold War. He chose Mountain View for retirement, and we're privileged to call him neighbor. Applause filled the room. Robert was uncomfortable with the attention, but appreciated the community support. Sheriff Davis presented a proclamation. Mountain View officially recognizes Robert Johnson's distinguished military service and continued dedication to community safety. A local veterans organization representative attended. Mr. Johnson, on behalf of all veterans, thank you for your service. NORAD operators were the first line of defense against nuclear annihilation. More applause. Robert stood and briefly addressed the crowd. Thank you for your kind words. I didn't serve for recognition, I served for duty. Mountain View has been a good home for 15 years. I'm proud to continue serving this community. Mrs. Evan Four. Henderson, representing the senior citizens, presented a handmade quilt. Robert, this quilt shows Mountain View Airport with the mountain background. A reminder that you're always watching over us. Robert was touched by the gesture. This is beautiful, thank you. Mayor Peterson concluded. Robert Johnson represents the best of American service. Quiet dedication, humble heroism, lifelong commitment to protecting others. Standing ovation. Robert was emotional. 40 years after NORAD retirement, he was finally receiving recognition. The community appreciated learning that their quiet airport manager was actually a Cold War guardian. Months later, Robert had settled into his new routine. Modern radar systems were operational, secure communications established, threat detection protocols updated. Mountain View Airport officially remained a civilian facility. Unofficially, it was a strategic early warning station. Robert detected several more unusual aircraft. A Chinese high-altitude surveillance flight, an unidentified drone over restricted airspace. Each time, appropriate authorities were notified, appropriate responses coordinated. Colonel Harper visited monthly, always praising Robert's performance. Mr. Johnson, your station has a 98% accuracy rate for threat identification. Better than many full-time installations. Robert was proud of the effectiveness. Good equipment helps, but experience matters too. Exactly why we needed you. The townspeople gradually adapted to Robert's dual role. Airport manager by day, national security specialist by, well, also by day. Mayor Peterson joked, "We have our own NORAD station now. Feel safer knowing Robert's watching." Mrs. Henderson brought coffee every morning. Our local hero needs proper fuel for protecting America. Robert appreciated the community support, no longer a lonely retirement. He had purpose, respect, friendship. At 74, he had discovered that retirement didn't mean ending service. Sometimes it meant finding new ways to serve. The Cold War was officially over, but vigilance continued. Someone had to watch the skies. Robert Johnson gladly accepted that responsibility. If you enjoy these powerful stories, don't forget to subscribe to the Last Stand channel. We'll continue bringing you more hero stories every day.